Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second hour of the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you. I want you to meet the Santita Jackson Morning Stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Thank you for liking and subscribing. Continue to do that. Continue to share the show, everybody. Please click that bell. Click that bell so that whenever we come up, you'll be notified. But please like and subscribe and pass the show. Everybody pass the show to at least one other person, would you? And please go to my Facebook page, the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Let me tell you what happened. If you have a personal page on Facebook, as we all do, those of us who are on Facebook, you top out at 5,000 people, which I did quite some time ago, and they start kicking people off. That is not what I'm doing. So if you have been pushed out of the Santita Jackson space, I'm not doing it. Facebook has their limitations, so I had to open up a Santita Jackson and Friends page. So that's why I need you all to go there. And so I said it should be Santita Jackson and Friends because that's what I'm doing anyway, right? So please get on over there and like and share. Like and share. Be a part of, follow me there. But also follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Santita J, at Santita J. There's also the Santita J show, but go to at Santita J and meet me there. Let's get involved. And I want you to stay tuned for the Rainbow Push convention, which we will be having this summer, and the Democratic convention. We're going to have a lot of activity around that. And, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, I think we might be doing some things around the Republican convention, too, because indeed that is something that A. Philip Randolph did 60 years ago. He organized demonstrations at both of the major party conventions in the United States because we need representation everywhere. And we need to make our voices heard. Need to put our issues and make them a part of everybody's platform. Everybody, make sure that you get registered to vote. And even in this primary season, please continue to vote. Continue to vote. You're seeing as different people are getting on ballots all over the country how important your vote is going to be. And please, high school seniors, or those of you who have high school seniors in your lives, even if they're 17 now, if they're going to be 18 by November, they need to get ready. You have to push them in the direction of getting registered to vote. Please do that. If you're voting in the primaries, we're still in that season. If you have any difficulty at all, when you get to the polls, if you find that your name's been pushed off the voter rolls, whatever it is, if you have trouble, if you have not mastered the English language, if you speak English as your second or third language, you are by law able to bring someone into the booth with you to help you to vote. But I want you to call 1-866-OUR-VOTE, 1-866-OUR-VOTE if you have any trouble at the polls. If you have any trouble at the polls, do not leave until you've cast a ballot. And if you have any difficulties, call 1-866-OUR-VOTE, 1-866-OUR-VOTE. Speak with someone, one of the lawyers or one of the persons there who are equipped to help you. Finish your vote and don't leave the polling place until you have cast your vote. Let's talk about, oh boy, what an election season this is. We thought that it was going to be kind of lackluster because you really didn't have a lot of options this season. I mean, when RFK dropped out of the Democratic Party, well, and Cornel West opted not to run as a Democrat, and neither is Jill Stein. Well, they left the field really to President Biden with a few notable exceptions. I mean, there's a gentleman, I think Congressman Massey, who won in Guam. He has a very interesting platform, by the way. But the same thing kind of happened on the Republican side. I mean, even as Nikki Haley, last person standing, really gave it her best shot, at the end of the day, it's been Trump all day long. So we thought that was really going to be the end of that. But now we're watching RFK Jr. get onto more and more ballots in more and more battleground states. What will this mean? Jill Stein is on more and more ballots. And every time people hear Dr. Cornel West, they become more and more excited about his candidacy. But something else is going on. For the first time in the history of the Republic, one of the major candidates uh, for the presidency is on trial. Now, Eugene Debs, back in the early part of the last century, the renowned socialist, got almost 1 million votes while in prison. And he was a socialist, very progressive fellow, particularly for that time. Uh, but he did win nearly 1 million votes. That is nothing to sneeze at, given the fact that uh, the polity, that the population was much smaller then. But we're in uncharted territory here. We really, really are. And with all of these indictments and these trials that former President Trump, Donald Trump, is facing, even as he continues to hold steady in the polls, even as he takes the slings and arrows, it seems like he's going from strength to strength. He could go to prison, everybody. So, what would that mean? Well, attorney C.K. Hoffler, uh, court TV legal analyst, former president of the National Bar Association, which is the largest and oldest, most prestigious black bar association in the world, more than 65,000 lawyers. She's the chair of Rainbow Push. I want to ask you what is going on. Well, Congressman Benny Thompson, the iconic congressman from the great state of Mississippi, is putting together some legislation that is really interesting. He is saying if President Trump goes to prison, his Secret Service protection should be withdrawn. What do you think about that? According to the Clarion Ledger out of Mississippi, their big newspaper, Democratic Congressman, quote, Benny Thompson from Mississippi, the ranking member of the Committee on Homeland Security, introduced legislation that would remove Secret Service protection from anyone convicted of a felony and sentenced to prison. According to this news release, the Denying Infinite Security and Government Resources Allocated Toward Convicted and Extremely Dishonorable Former Protectees Act, or the Disgraced Former Protectees Act, which is H.R. 8081, would reform the U.S. Secret Service's protective mission by automatically terminating Secret Service protection for those who have been sentenced to prison following a conviction for a federal or state felony. That is Donald Trump. So, what do you think about that? The news release said, C.K. Hoffler, unfortunately, current law doesn't anticipate how Secret Service protection would impact the felony prison sentence of a protectee or even a former president. It is regrettable that it has come to this, but this previously unthought of scenario could become our reality. Therefore, it is necessary, his news release said, for us to be prepared and update the law so the American people can be assured that protective status does not translate into special treatment, and that those who are sentenced to prison will indeed serve the time required of them. What do you think about that, everybody? Please join the Santita Jackson Morning Stars and weigh in. There are legal ramifications, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, but there are also political ramifications, and there's social and cultural. I mean, it's a whole lot. And it could either weaken him going into the election season or it could strengthen him, depending upon what your life experiences are. And I think that cuts across all racial, social, and political lines. So you let us know what your thoughts are. What do you make of HR 8081? Is it practical? I mean, just the idea, Attorney Hoffler, is positively stunning. But I guess when you look at where we are, it's quite a time. What do you make of this?
Well, Santita, you have said it correctly. We are really um, swimming in uncharted waters. This is so this where we are right now with a former president who was running for president of the United States, who has been indicted multiple times, who is currently in the middle of a criminal trial in the state of New York. The hush money trial. There are other trials. He's been sued from a civil standpoint. He's been held liable from a civil standpoint because in civil cases, the standard is you're held liable. You're held personally liable, or your company is held liable, or your officers are held liable, but you don't necessarily go to jail in a civil context. But in a criminal context, you are either found guilty or you're acquitted or there's a hung jury. But in some instances, you can go to jail. And in the case of the hush money trial in New York, if the president, the former president, is convicted, Donald Trump, if he is convicted, then there's a good likelihood that he could be sentenced and go to jail. So that is why, in anticipation of that, Santita, there's now legislation being introduced. There are political pundits are opining on this, legal experts are opining on this, because we are in uncharted territory. We don't know. We've never had a situation in recent memory, certainly not in my lifetime, a
I mean, I had to go back to
scenario that's
Eugene
presented.
Debs. I
Right.
mean,
Well,
that was in 1920. I mean, that is, and it was
a
also,
century
it
ago.
was, yeah, and it was also a very different time, right? I mean, well, you did have a lot of political activity because, we were moving into the Gilded Age,
Yes.
and you saw a lot of rapaciousness. That is to say, workers were absolutely, we just haven't shaken the shackles of slavery, right? I mean, and so workers were stirring and they were saying we're not being treated fairly, which is why you had an active socialist party and communist party in the United States at that time, because people were searching politically for some answers, because I mean, child labor was a real issue. I mean, all of this stuff at this time. So he became this incredibly powerful and popular figure. And they used the Treason Act to put him in prison.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if you can imagine, um, he
It's
got nearly a
unimaginable,
mil-
Santita.
he got
It's
nearly a
it's
million votes while he was sitting in prison. CK Eugene did.
well, we and we know that Marion Barry, who is beloved,
Well,
the late Marion Barry, he also went to jail and came out and won. So, the fact that someone is incarcerated doesn't necessarily mean that they won't get elected. But
yeah, but
that's
do you
not the
run from
issue.
jail? I
Well,
mean,
you can run from jail. I mean, there are like I don't know
mhm.
that I am not aware of a precedent here in the United States of a presidential candidate running for jail from jail.
Okay.
But there is a
But that
scenario
was Eugene Debs. I mean, but that was a century ago. But
but
now,
that was a century ago. And
wow.
Santita, I think the situation was very, very, very different.
Hmm.
And let's remove politics from this. Because to me, and the reason why I want to remove politics from this in a highly politicized, with a highly politicized issue, is because this is not whether Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, is incarcerated or not, is not going to impact his base.
Mm.
So it could fortify his base. It could strengthen his base. So I don't think that that's going to make a huge difference with a lot of people. The people that it may make a difference with are those independents, those on the border, those who are undecided, those young folks who don't like either one of the candidates.
Mm.
It might impact them. They may stay home and not vote, which would be a travesty. So that may cause that, and other things may cause people not to vote. But former President Donald Trump's base, I don't think will be impacted in a negative way if he were to be convicted and sentenced to prison time or even serve. So if we take that out and just look at the legal questions surrounding that, we know that former presidents have, as part of their detail, Secret Service. So there's a very dicey legal issue. How can you have, or what are the legal parameters for the Secret Service who are supposed to be with all former presidents? That's just part of what it is to be a former president without going through the entire legal analysis and how we got there. What will it look like? How will we be able to accommodate the incarceration of a former president? Let's just start with former president. Let's not talk about sitting president, but let's just talk about a former president who is entitled to Secret Service protection 24/7. What does that look like? Because if there's one place where someone might need protection, it would be when you're incarcerated. I mean, I think we don't need to, we just know that instinctively. We don't have to go through statistics. And so the secret, but The facilities obviously are not designed to accommodate Secret Service detail, not to mention all of the legalities of having Secret Service workers who are Secret Service men and women on that detail in an incarcerated facility. There are a whole host of security issues that attach to that. So those are legal questions that undoubtedly some court is going to have to address, probably sooner rather than later, because there is a likelihood that a Manhattan or a New York jury will find former President Donald Trump guilty. It can happen. I don't know anything about the evidence. The case has just started. They just impaneled a jury. Opening statements are coming up. So we don't even know what the evidence really is going to be. Now, and evidence, so that everybody who's listening knows, evidence is what are witnesses going to say at trial? What documents will be introduced at trial? What is going to happen at trial? Because that's how evidence comes in for the jury's consideration. What will happen at trial? It's one thing for all the speculation and documents and people exchanging information before a jury is impaneled. But once a jury is impaneled, the prosecution still has to prove his case. He's going to have to prove his case. And beyond a reasonable doubt, because this is a criminal trial. This is not a civil trial where with a civil trial, it is by the greater weight of the evidence. You got to imagine scales of justice slightly tipped in favor of one side or the other. That's in a civil trial, but in a criminal trial, you've got to prove your case if you're the prosecutor beyond a reasonable doubt. 12 people have to agree on that.
Well, hold on. Wait. Let me ask you this. Because what does that mean to a juror? I mean, what must a juror think in order to convict?
A juror must think that pretty much former President Donald Trump is guilty of one or more of the crimes that he allegedly committed and that are at issue in this trial. So it doesn't have to be 100%. It's got to be more than the greater weight of the evidence. It's got to be more than clear and convincing evidence. So if I like to think of it as greater weight of the evidence, which is the standard for a civil case in most jurisdictions, in most claims, is slightly tipping the scale. So let's say a little over 50%. Clear and convincing evidence, which is also a legal standard, with the burden of and the person and when it comes to the greater weight of the evidence, it's always in a civil case the plaintiff that bears the burden of proof. In a civil case, when the proof is clear and convincing evidence, that's not 100%. It's not as high as beyond a reasonable doubt, but it's somewhere in between the greater weight of the evidence and beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond a reasonable doubt, however, being the highest standard, because you're going to potentially send someone to jail, or in some jurisdictions, which is not on the table in this case, to the death chamber. That's not on the issue in this case. It's not a consideration in this case, but it could be a consideration for, if convicted, for former President Donald Trump to either be under house arrest, be placed under house arrest, or serve time. That is a real consideration if convicted. So if I'm a juror thinking about this, I have to see strong evidence laid the right way coming in from the prosecution that former President Donald Trump committed these crimes, one or more of the crimes. Now, the way that it works in criminal cases, the prosecutors are going to plead a lot. They're going to have a number of crimes usually that the defendant is being accused of. But they really only have to prove one for there to be a conviction. So in this case itself, again, we don't know how the evidence will be laid. We don't know what happened in the final analysis because, Santita, I can tell you in any trial, things change, things happen.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to plan in this country for a scenario where our former president and the current candidate, the candidate who is seeking the presidency from the Republican Party, Donald Trump, could be convicted. And this is in state court, Santita. So there will not be a presidential pardon because much like Georgia, in New York, where this case is being brought, he would not be able to be pardoned by a president of the United States.
One moment then. Who has the power in the state? Is that a gubernatorial pardon that he would have to get?
Right, but some cases, in some instances, gubernatorial pardons are not permitted.
Okay.
So as I understand, and I'm not licensed in New York State, So I want to say that I'm originally from New York State, but I'm not licensed as a lawyer to practice law there. But as I understand it, in the state of New York, if convicted, he would not be able to avail himself of a gubernatorial pardon. And again, we know the politics of the state of New York. This is where politics do come into play. I'm not certain that even if he were, if this governor or a sitting governor in the state of New York would pardon him. But that's just a thought that I have. In the state of Georgia, if he is convicted of the crimes of RICO in the state of Georgia, he will not be able to be pardoned by any governor in the state of Georgia. Politics won't mean a thing. So he would mandatorily serve a sentence in the state of Georgia, which is why there was so much focus on the case in Georgia, trying to stall it, trying to get delayed, trying to get the prosecutor off, trying to get the case dismissed, all of that because they understood. And I don't blame defense attorneys for doing their job, which is trying to represent to the best of their ability and zealously their client and trying to stall, push back, get things overturned, move, do whatever. I don't blame them for doing that. Some of them may have stepped over the line in cases. I think that that's not appropriate, but I don't blame lawyers for being zealous advocates on behalf of their clients. So in the case of New York, the hush money case that's going on, that's pending right now, that is in trial technically, your jury has been impaneled. That case, Santita, I don't know how long it'll last. I will predict that the defense on a regular basis every day is going to file motions to try to get delayed, stall, have separate proceedings, and the like. I believe that that will likely happen. But even having said that, I think without a question, the trial will be over and there should be a verdict one way or the other before the elections. So that begs the question. Suppose if former President Donald Trump is found to be not guilty, then we don't need to have this discussion. If there's a hung jury, temporarily, we don't need to have this discussion because the prosecution will make a determination whether they bring the case again. And if there is a hung jury, but if he is convicted and not acquitted, if he's convicted of those criminal and the hush money case, of those crimes, then we have to address the issue. What happens? Where will he be incarcerated? Will the judge sentence him that way? And if so, where will the Secret Service go? How will we accommodate the Secret Service, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? A bunch of constitutional issues and questions. The founding fathers did not envision that a president or a former president, and certainly not a presidential candidate who has the nomination, would be in the middle of a criminal trial and potentially convicted before being elected.
But
So these are all things, Santita, that the founding fathers never envisioned. Well, of course, the founding fathers didn't envision that Black people were people. So I'm not giving credit to the founding fathers on that, but I'm just saying as an aside. So there are a number of constitutional issues that are going to be resolved and that probably will escalate up to the U.S. Supreme Court. This is a mess. This is a travesty, and this is a very sad time for us, a very dark time for us. And I'm not saying at all in making those statements that our former president isn't where he's supposed to be. That I'm not saying that he should not be confronting charges because I'm not speaking about
his because I'm saying that we have to take it off of him for a minute. I think we've gotten so focused on him that we're not looking at what Congressman Benny Thompson said. He said we've never been here before. So now this situation gives us the opportunity to look at the if, then, therefore. If I had hypothetical,
and we have to
that is real. Why?
Congressman Benny Thompson is absolutely right. We must do this because there is a possibility that he will be convicted. And this is the only case that I think will tee up and will be done and resolved potentially before the election. So it's real. And right now, going into any trial, you have at least a 50% chance that you'll win and a 50% chance that you'll lose. And then as the evidence comes in, and depending upon how the jury receives the evidence, you just never know. And you never can tell what a jury is going to do. I've worked with jury consultants, Santita, for years. You just never can tell. So I think that's why what Congressman Benny Thompson is saying is absolutely true. No matter how you feel about this issue politically, there needs to be some type of an evolution of the legality of a former president being incarcerated, and a presidential nominee being convicted and under other circumstances subjected to jail time prior to prior to the country voting on whether that person is going to be the next president of the United States. We have to plan for that. But it's still a sad day that we are in this place. And that's what I'm saying. Remove it from former President Donald Trump, for any president to be in this space. I think it's a sad day for any president to be brought up on these types of charges. I think it's a sad day, hush money charges, for any president to have been found liable in the way that former President Donald Trump has recently been
Well,
found
then hold
liable,
on.
whether it's for sexual assault or whatever. All of that makes it a very, very sad day.
I mean, but Nixon was a sad time, right? So let's go
And
back
it
to that.
was.
But what they did do, a bipartisan group of senators, and really the government came together at that time and said, you know what? We are in uncharted territory. And we've spent the summer with these hearings. This has gone on for more than a year. The country's beginning to come apart because we were kids then, CK. But it was so tense. And they went to the White House famously, according to the history books, to the recounting of history. And they went to President Nixon and said, look, you're looking at an impeachment, which is an indictment. And in all likelihood, you will be found guilty. But just the impeachment in and of itself is a whole lot for America to go through.
Yes.
So what we want you to do, we as Republicans and Democrats, right and left, wings of both parties, you need to resign. Spare Americans just spare Americans all of this pain. And then his successor said, I'm taking prison off the table for you. Because psychologically, it would be so injurious to the American public for them to see the former leader of their country, let alone the free world, march off to prison. I have to tell you, my father was not a favorite of President Nixon's, as I'm sure you know. But when he gave his speech the night before he resigned, I cried. To me, it was so sad. And I really felt awful to watch him brought so low. I mean, it's just, it's just as a human being. And then, presidents, whether you support them or not, they mean so much. I mean, they just do. The office itself, And I'm just wondering, as prison in and of itself, to watch anyone go to prison is tough. But I mean, it just is. But I'm wondering, CK, withdrawing his Secret Service protection in prison, no doubt he has some friends in prison. But what would that look like, CK? I mean, you have your own radio show on WOL every Tuesday, everybody. So I want to know, on WAOK, the iconic Atlanta radio station. But because you all can listen at any time, check her out because it is a fantastic hour of power and you can get some free legal advice. So what time is it? Is it 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time?
It's 11 o'clock every Tuesday from 11 to 12 Eastern Standard Time.
Okay, and get your free legal advice in. I'm just wondering, and the great political issues of our day, she really takes them apart as she's taking this apart. I'm just wondering, CK, I know I've talked for a minute, but I guess I'm just very full because I don't want I can't unsee this and I don't want to see it.
No, I don't want to see it either. I'm separating out what the former president may or may not have done and what a jury may convict him of. But it's just for us. That's why I say it's a sad time in our history.
Mm-hmm.
But by the same token, I must say that we see every single day a lot of people held accountable for bad judgment that have done similar things that are alleged that the former president has done, and they are held accountable. And so just as how a court, a group of jurors, also found him liable. He's been found liable actually many times in litigation, but recently, um, I think there's a possibility at least that this will happen. Yes, it's a sad day, and so I'm torn. For if he weren't, even as if he weren't the former president, with the types of allegations that are
Mhm.
out there, if it were anyone else, more 9 times out of 10, they would not be able to use some of the tactics that the former president is using. Because when you do have resources, you can hire a battalion of lawyers to throw everything at the court and at the other side.
Mm.
Now, I will say many of those tactics have not worked. They really haven't. The case is proceeding and it's going on, and it's going to get to a jury, I predict, because
Mm.
they probably will move for mistrial for every little thing. But I think this judge is going to do what he is going to do and administer this case. He does not want to hold former President Donald Trump in contempt. He does not want to put down the former president in jail for violating a gag order. But I can tell you right now, based on what we know of the former president, he is just begging for there to be begging for the judge to put him in jail. He wants that. His actions make it seem like he wants that to happen. Certainly he's bored and falling asleep. That's not a good look in front of a jury, but he just I think wants his conduct. When a judge has told you repeatedly, do not threaten witnesses, the judicial people in the judicial system, my
My daughter. I just thought I put
family,
that.
the prosecutor. By the way, how about jurors? Do not do that. Do not do that. And why is that important? Because that will interfere with the appropriate administration of justice. Jurors don't go to serve and do their civic duty to be threatened. And it's not just that the former president is threatening. What we know is he's got loyal people who will sit and burn themselves if necessary and will throw themselves on the sword or commit heinous acts, criminal acts, in support of or in name of. And that's the problem. It's not just about the former president. So, all of those things are circulating in this case. But I dare say this judge is not going to take the bait. This judge is going to do everything he can to preserve the record, everything he can to protect those jurors, everything he can to protect the parties, including the former president, because that is what the appropriate administration of justice will look like. And he's not going to take the bait, no matter how much and how many times the former president tries to take him there. He's not going there. And
Well,
the prosecutors have also said, we are not afraid of you and the people who follow you. We are going to try this case. So they've exhausted a lot of things that they tried to do to stall, but in the course of trial, there'll be other things. And that's not to say that there may not be some legitimate issues that are raised. I don't know. I'm not in a position because they haven't been raised yet. And unfortunately, there aren't going to, it's my understanding, there aren't going to be cameras in the courtroom. And so without cameras in the courtroom, we're going to have to rely on people's accounts. And I never like to rely on people's accounts when I love to be able to look at it myself. I love to be able to look at when I do legal commentary, whether it's on Court TV or any other platform. I like to be able to look myself at the evidence being laid because I am then able to form an opinion. I like to look and listen to what the
mm.
judge is saying versus reading it, because a judge's demeanor in delivery can also speak volumes. We don't have the benefit with television in the courtroom of seeing the jury, but I would be speculating and giving an opinion on how the jury would receive the information based on my experience as a trial lawyer. But the other stuff I like to see for myself. When you don't have cameras in the courtroom, you've got to rely on a third person's account who happens
I
to be
don't
there.
like that, CK.
And that's not the most reliable for me, although I like to read transcripts. And then, everybody has their interpretation and their spin.
Yeah, because I
So
have to tell
I
you,
think we
I'm
are.
not having cameras in there. I, I want to see. I don't want to. because everybody's got their point of view, and I have mine, and I'd like to see the former president, how he looks at the jury, his interaction with the judge. I want to hear how the judge says speaks to the president and what he says. I don't want to depend upon anyone
Right.
else. At least there's too much that's open to interpretation. So whichever way the jury goes, there's something that I've missed. That having been said, my question for you: in this highly contentious political environment, I mean, and no one is lukewarm about Donald John Trump. Nobody. He's loved, he's loathed. I mean, or
True.
some people, as one guy who was a potential juror said, "Oh, well, he's fascinating to me. I can buy that. I can buy someone who kind of stands back and has to look at all this because there's just so much coming at you from day to day to day. Is it? And you have had clients who've gone to prison. Is it feasible? And you've had high profile clients who've gone to prison. I mean, and to fully disclose, my brother was one of your clients. Um, but we've had the benefit of living with people. And so when Jesse went to prison, he went early. So you, as you remember, because you took him, he surprised everybody because he showed up a day early. But he was also willing to work there, which surprised the prison. They were like, "No, I'm not going to have you cleaning the toilets." He said, "I don't mind doing that. I've done that. I mean, I will do it." And you saw when Bill Cosby went to prison, when Dr. Cosby went to prison, he was protected because he's a regular guy. I mean, I just keep on going. I'm wondering, what would it look like for the former president of the United States to be in prison and not have Secret Service protection? That is unprecedented, CK.
That is unprecedented. I don't know. It's unprecedented to have a former president go to jail. It's unprecedented to have a former president go to jail and not have Secret Service protection, to be in any environment without Secret Service
I mean,
protection.
is it
It's
practical?
unprecedented for us to be in this position in this country. No, I think it's not practical, but a lot of things aren't practical. A lot of things aren't practical when you are going to be incarcerated. It's not even about practicality.
What
It
is it
is not
about that?
practical for anyone to be incarcerated. And so, yes, they're going to, but there are a lot of different spaces and it depends on where he is. I mean, if he goes to Rikers, I don't know. But there are a lot of accommodations that can be made for people in the prison system.
Really?
So, yeah, when I say accommodations, I mean, in some prison systems, they have accommodations for people who are severely ill. In
Okay.
some prisons. So there are a lot of there might be spaces that are, or certain spaces or rooms or in certain prisons that are not being used, that are closed off, that are storage facilities. There are a lot of things that can be done, perhaps, but there's got to be a framework put in place to do that.
Well, Lloyd, do you know what I just thought about? I just thought about Robin Island
Hmm.
and President Nelson Mandela, who's not yet
Nelson Mandela.
president. He was I at one point they got him a house.
Hmm.
Remember?
Hmm.
And they took him out of the prison itself
Hmm.
and they put him in a house and he was guarded by the prison guards. Can you see something like that happening?
Yeah, but okay, let's just talk about Nelson Mandela. I hate to even mention the word Nelson
Well, I
Mandela
mean,
and Donald Trump in the same sentence, but with Nelson Mandela, he had served, when that happened, probably 20 years,
yeah.
as a political prisoner. So I think that's one thing. And but former President Donald Trump, I don't know if I think the maximum sentence could be less than 10 years, certainly. And he doesn't have a record, so I'm not even sure what the sentence would be, but if convicted. But I would say this: would there be some accommodations to, or with his Secret Service protection that he is constitutionally entitled to? Would there be some accommodations that way? A space created, some areas? I don't know, because this is uncharted territory, but we
Mm.
have to explore that. And I would dare say that they are exploring that. I don't have any evidence of it, but they are exploring that right now in the state of New York. They have to, they must, because they have potentially, potentially they have a scenario where a former president who's entitled to Secret Service protection 24/7 right now, unless something changes, and it
So,
can change. So they have to be able to explore that as an eventuality if he is convicted.
so you're saying
Because,
that what Benny Thompson is doing is absolutely appropriate because at least putting this on the legislative table is
yeah, I
helping,
mean, I
is
hate that
putting
he
it out
has
there.
to. I hate that we are in this position, but
But he
I
has
think that
to,
we have
right?
to. I think we have to. I think that's a reasonable thing to do,
Mm.
given the dynamics. I hate that we have to even think this way, but I do think it's reasonable.
It's stunning. I mean, so but in such, I mean, the how, look, there's a rate, there's basically a split in the US House of Representatives. I mean, that's where this legislation is. Um, can you see it even being debated squarely? I mean, I
I
mean, without,
think given our U.S. Congress and our U.S. Senate today, I could see there being a very vicious debate on this issue.
yeah,
I don't even want to tune into that debate because I think this is a sad day in our country.
it is. But but
Um,
CK, we're here.
we are here, so it
That's
has to happen. That's my point. It has to happen, but I don't have to like it. I'm being
yeah,
honest. I think it's sad. That's not a political statement.
yeah.
Saying that I feel sad about this is not a political statement. It's just a statement of how I feel that we have been reduced to this.
But okay, but let me go back to this point. You are saying that prisoners can and do get special accommodations.
Yeah,
Given,
and whether I feel that that's appropriate or not is a different thing.
we're
Because I
not
think there
talking
should
about
be
that,
one set of rules.
right?
I think there should
Yeah,
be one set of rules. When people in our community are incarcerated, rightfully or wrongfully convicted, wrongfully or rightfully, they have to serve time,
hmm,
whether they have a record or not. There is no consideration for Secret Service and all those types of things. And I am one who believes in prison reform. I strongly believe in prison reform.
why? What do you mean by that?
Because I think the state of our prisons in this country and the condition that incarcerated people face is devastatingly bad. And the fate, I've written an op-ed piece, Santita, on this, of what it's like for formerly incarcerated women, particularly women of color, to matriculate back because they have different issues than men, even men of color, confront when they come out because of the role of women in the household and the family structure in the home. So I say that on behalf of, I say that I believe in prison transformation and reform as it relates to all incarcerated individuals, not having anything to do with the former president, all incarcerated individuals. I have a case right now, Santita, where I'm representing a family of somebody who was HIV positive in the Fulton County jail system who was stabbed to death recently within the past month. 25 or 26 people have died recently in the past couple of years in the Fulton County jails, many of them just awaiting their day in court, not having been convicted, none of that, just awaiting. I know in Chicago, the statistics are probably also astounding. You see, so I am very much in favor of prison reform. And there's a robust conversation, and many people who are on point with that. And so when we talk about, but let me just be clear. I'm not talking about that as it relates to the former president, because many of those people don't have the options and the luxuries that the former
Yeah,
president has. When they get arrested, they stay in jail. That's not what we're talking about here. He's been
and they're
out
not
running for
protected,
president.
and they're
Right.
not protected. They just go
They're not
in, and
protected
that's it.
in any way. They may not be able to make bond. They can't post a bond. They can't post a $500 bond. They can't do the things that this president has had the ability to do. I'm not mad at the president for having the ability to do that. I'm just saying the vast majority of incarcerated individuals don't have and didn't have that luxury. Their families couldn't afford that. You see, so and again, I'm not mad at the president for being able to afford it. I'm just saying that when we talk about incarcerated individuals in this country, we've
Hmm.
talked about what happens to Black and brown people in who are incarcerated. When we look at their conditions, we see a very different picture than what the president more than likely ever would be able to confront if convicted.
What do you make of? I mean, we only have about 7 or 8 minutes left here. This conversation went fast.
Yes.
what there is much is being made, and I know on your radio show every Tuesday on WAOK 11 Eastern Standard Time for 1 hour. I promise you everybody would love it, love it, love it. 11 Eastern Standard Time, WAOK every Tuesday. CK Hoffler's show. What do you make of the gag order? I mean,
Well, the gag
the
order, Santita, I've litigated First Amendment issues. So I do know a little something about it. First Amendment issues, meaning defamation, false, like things like that, where people,
Mhm.
and of course, having been intricately involved in Rainbow Push for the past 37 years, of course, I am an advocate of freedom of speech, protests, legal protests. People should have the right to express themselves. Violence associated with that, that's different. But protesting a condition, protesting circumstances, protesting an injustice, protesting speaking out, I don't have a problem with that. Being an obstructionist when you have a legal case and threatening and terrorizing families and people in the court system, the judge and all that, no, I'm not in favor of that.
Mm.
So that there's a gag order so that we can have an appropriate system of justice so that the jurors don't have to feel that their lives are being threatened, not by necessarily the individual, but if the individual makes comments that his following would threaten them, find their family members, etc., that's not the appropriate administration of justice.
But hasn't he violated the gag order?
Of course, he has violated again. He's
So
been
why?
admonished by the court many times,
Okay.
many times.
Is that all they can do?
No, the judge can put him in jail, hold him in contempt.
Why has he not done that?
Probably because he does not want to have all of the issues that we just talked about come up
Okay.
right now.
I'm
He
sorry.
wants there to be a trial. He
Okay.
wants him to have his day in court.
Okay. 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 My that's where the politics comes in, because you have so many people who are in their feelings about this case and all these other cases. We're not look, everybody, we're not apologizing for the president. All we're trying to do is look the various scenarios, because we've not been here before. I mean, when we got just feet away from this,
Right.
the leaders in our government 50 years ago stopped it. I mean, whatever people, I mean, and many people felt that Gerald Ford, President Ford, killed his chances of being elected to office when he pardoned President Nixon. But he said, look, this national nightmare has got to be over. It's a nightmare. And I feel like this is a nightmare, CK.
It is. It is a nightmare. But I think it's a reality that we have to confront.
Well, what's
And by
the
the way,
upside? I
when
mean,
I talk
what's our
about these
takeaway?
legal issues, I mean, the upside is, if we believe in our system and our judiciary, then Donald Trump will have his day in court
Okay.
in a criminal case, and he can be acquitted of all charges. And so that can happen. That could be the upside for him. That, for many, that would not be an upside, but that could be an upside for him. And I think that the way we are progressing in this country, we are bound to have this happen because we're so polarized. I don't know that that's an upside. That's just a reality. And
Mm.
when I do legal commentary, I try not to inject politics, because it doesn't matter what I believe personally, whether I'm a Democrat or Republican. I look at the legal issues associated with it.
Okay.
And that's what I want people to talk about. Because in talking about that, thinking through the legal issues, we have greater clarity. That's part of being in a democracy, being able to analyze and think and talk about these things without ramifications or repercussions. And that's why I'm a big proponent of not having any defendant or plaintiff in any case to be able to terrorize judges, jurors, witnesses. No, too many people died. Too many of us died so that there could be a system of justice. Many people are dying today for that. So I'm not in favor of that, but I'm not looking at the politics of it. I know other people are, but when I do legal commentary, I just call it the way I see it, Santita. And so when there is a mockery of the judiciary, and by the way, I'm not very pleased with how the U.S. Supreme Court has conducted itself and some of the justices on many occasions. That's not me being a Democrat or Republican.
Hmm.
It's just I'm not pleased. I'm not pleased with the self-policing of the U.S. Supreme Court that takes place. That has nothing to do with me being a Democrat or Republican. I am
Well,
a
do you
Democrat.
think they're being too? Do you think they're favoring one party over another? I mean, do you
I
think
think
it?
they are. I think party politics are coming into play, and they should
Mm,
not. That's the whole purpose of a U.S. Supreme Court, the highest court of the land. We should not be. We should. They should not be subjected. They should not be impacted by politics. But they don't.
partisanship.
So,
But you know what? In the last minute here, I mean, what's our takeaway? What should we be looking for in this trial? I mean, we haven't gotten to it. We haven't gotten to Georgia yet. I mean, that's with this one
what we should
because,
be
like you
looking for?
said, it could be over in weeks.
It could be over in less than that, less than weeks, but it could be over. It depends on how quickly the. What we should look for are a number of witnesses that are going to talk about and come forth with evidence, because evidence can be in the form of testimony or can be in the form of documents. Of course, it can be in form of many evidence can take place or can be presented in multiple ways for the jury to consider. So we can expect that there's going to be very what people might perceive salacious testimony, because this is about hush money. This is about allegedly Donald Trump having sexual relations with a porn star and him paying her off and engaging in financial improprieties in the way that he did that, not permissible under New York state law and other laws of this nation. So we could expect there to be evidence to be laid with that. And the jurors are going to have to decide who they believe, because, what happens at a trial, you've got a witness that will testify, and that witness is going to be cross-examined. And in this case, the cross-examination of the witnesses that the government is going to put up or the prosecutor is going to put up are going to be cross-examined ferociously. And then it's going to be to the juror to decide, who do they believe? Do they believe that witness? Do they give credibility to that witness or not? Do they believe the documents that are going to be presented? Are they going to believe the defenses presented by the president? There are always two sides to every story, and people say the truth is somewhere in between. What will these jurors believe? So we can expect a lot of evidence, witnesses to present evidence for both sides. And then we can expect a tough judge who's going to want to run an orderly courtroom, who's making it very clear to the president he needs to abide by the rules. That's what I think we can expect, Santita.
Attorney C.K. Hoffler, check her out on Court TV. She's giving some of the best analysis, and let them know that you want to see as much of C.K. Hoffler as they can possibly uh, put her on. I know she's got a great practice and all of that. One day we have to have you come back and speak more about NIL, because as we watch
Yes,
Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark and Dawn Staley and just the women coming, just really bursting forth
yes.
in basketball. I'm wondering if they might try to pull Dawn Staley to be the coach of an NBA team. I mean, she is the coach. But that's me.
Yep.
That's I don't know. I mean, and so with NIL and with what you are doing in sport, um, and name and image and likeness, and protecting our athletes and helping them to maximize their economic opportunities and to protect their legacies. I
Yes.
can't wait to talk with you about that. But of course, we'll be watching these trials, everybody. Pay attention and please get registered to vote. If you have any challenges at the polls, call 1-866 our vote. 1-866 our vote. Do not leave the polling place until you have cast your vote. And if you have any questions, call 1-866 our vote. They are there to help you. And everybody, if you need help, if you can't read, and there's no shame in that, or if English is not your primary language, your first language, you have the right to take someone into the polls with you. Sometimes the judges are not really acquainted with or truly, truly understanding of election law. So don't let what happened to Crystal Mason happen to you. Find out as much as you can before you get to the polls, but call 1-866 our vote. They will help you with that. And to be fair to Crystal Mason, she asked a lot of questions. She even asked the judge at the polling places. She was given back wrong information and then a 5-year sentence. So, and these high school seniors, get them registered to vote. Get them registered to vote. Your vote really does matter. Check out CK Hoffler on WAOK, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every Tuesday, Court TV. Madam Chair of Rainbow Push, former president of the National Bar Association. I'm breathless just recounting all of your magnificence. And
Wow.
I love it, love it, love it. I love you, my dear sister.
Love you too, Santita.
I love you, AM 950 Radio. Stay tuned here for the best progressive talk any place in the nation. I'll see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson